of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We intentionally recognize that the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado and honor the elders past, present, and future that have stewarded this land. We recognize that many of our institutions were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples, and much of our nation was built by the hands and on the backs of enslaved Africans and Indigenous folks. We express gratitude for and celebrate their contributions and strive to never take for granted our privilege and the complexity of living, working, and creating on this land. We intentionally honor the Black, Indigenous, and communities of color in our city and commit to cultural equity. We strive to make this a safe and welcoming space where healing can occur, truths can be told, and legacies of oppression can continually be dismantled. With that said, again, my name is Leah. I work with Transforming Creatives, a partner organization that helps produce tools for the creative life, which is a monthly series aimed at providing creatives with connection, new skills, inspirational capital, and the tools to craft a healthy creative ecosystem. The events are produced in partnership by the Rhino Art District, Transforming Creatives, the CBCA, and the Creative Integration Initiative. We are recording today's session. I know that popped up probably when some of you joined us. And as a monthly series, we do record all of these workshops. Topics range from financial planning and grant writing to how to price your artwork. And you can find a ton of these recordings on our website, as well as the Rhino Art District and the CBCA's websites. We are also really open to hearing from you about which topics you're most interested in learning about. It's good we have so many folks attending today. So I just want to encourage you to reach out during or after this event to let us know what topics you're most interested in hearing about. I'm going to give everybody on our collaborators group a chance to introduce themselves. I'm going to go first real quick. Transforming Creatives is an organization based in Rhino that invests in the health of creatives so that they can invest in society. We do this through public workshops and other professional development resources like this event series, in addition to opportunities to improve personal and mental wellness like support groups and affordable mental health resources and affordable workspace at Converge Denver, the space I'm in right now, which is in the Rhino Art District too. If you want to see what events are going on with us and check out our workspace options, you can head to transformingcreatives.org and see what's up. Now I'm going to pass it off to, I believe, Molly, who's going to introduce the art district.
Hey everyone, I'm Molly Paylett. I'm with Rhino Art District. My role specifically is with the Rhino Art Park, which is a new sort of creative complex. If you haven't been, come by and check it out. And I will pass it over to Allison.
Hi, I'm a creative consultant. I work with Transforming Creatives, and I helped put this programming together. I'm going to pass it to, I guess, Meredith.
I'm going to kick it to Teague first, because then I'm going to introduce our panel.
Absolutely. Thank you, Meredith. My name is Teague. I am with Creative Integration Initiative. Our mission is to be a beacon for creative vitality through education, coaching, and curation of the visual arts. And our last collaborative sponsor is Meredith from the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts.
Yay! Thanks, everyone. I'm Meredith Badler. I'm the Deputy Director at the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts, the CBCA. Our work is to advance the creative economy here in Colorado and doing that through the intersection of arts and business. We do a lot at CBCA. We do advocacy work, research, leadership development, education and training like this, other arts engagement activities, all at that intersection of arts and business. We actually have a in-person forum on arts and the environment coming up next month. So we were really excited to work with our fellow collaborators on this topic, really focused on artists and their creative practice, and how you can put an environmental lens on your work, both the content of your work as well as the creative process to make your creative work, and doing that in the global climate and context we're all part of. So we are thrilled to have such an incredible group of panelists and moderator today. I'm going to call on each one of them to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about who they are and the work they do. I'll conclude with our moderator, and then he'll dive into some prepared questions. We have plenty of time reserved for Q&A. As you're hearing these conversations, no need to wait till the end. Put those questions in the chat, and we'll make sure we'll hear from you. We're also collecting a bunch of resources. We already have several that our panelists have provided, so those will get shared out afterward. All right, first up, we are truly leaning into the virtual platform here. We have Molly Braverman joining us from the Broadway Green Alliance, dialing in from the East Coast. Molly, introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. Happy to be in Denver virtually. Wish it were in person, as I adore the place. But I am Molly Braverman. I use the she, her pronouns. And as you mentioned, I am the director of the Broadway Green Alliance. And we are a nonprofit based in New York City, but serving the entire country that aims to educate, motivate, and inspire the entire theater community and all patrons to adopt environmentally friendlier practices. I've been in the director position for about 3 years. Prior to that, I was actually a volunteer with the organization as a volunteer green captain. That was just something I can share more about later, when I was a full-time stage manager on tour with Wicked. And I still work as a stage manager. So I'm coming from the theater perspective. I'm a vacation cover in my spare time for Wicked and Hamilton. And it's just a delight to be here.
Thanks, Molly. You can give us behind the scenes insight on how things work in Wicked, maybe later on. Next, Molly's colleague, Meagan Holdeman, who is joining us from Denver. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Meagan. My pronouns are she, her, and I am local to Denver. I am a sound technician at the Denver Center of the Performing Arts. So I put the sound systems together and run the microphones for the shows that happen here. And I'm a grad student with Miami University, the project Dragonfly. That was kind of my pandemic project, was I got into grad school to start doing more of the environmental stuff. And that's how I found the Broadway Green Alliance and started doing this environmental work within the theater industry. So I am doing work to start a chapter of the Broadway Green Alliance in Colorado. We just actually had our first community discussion on Monday to kind of get the ball rolling and figure out what kind of organization we need, what kind of help Denver theaters, Colorado theaters need to start taking steps in the more environmentally friendly direction.
Awesome. Thanks, Meagan. Yeah, I know it's been a busy week for you, but all on the same wavelength. Next up, Matthew. We have a Matt and a Matthew. So Matthew Shaw with ReCreative Denver. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Matthew Shaw, he, him. So ReCreative Denver is a creative reuse nonprofit and community art space. We have a big arts and crafts store that's all donated and recycled items, fabric, yarn, painting, supplies, everything you need to start a new hobby or continue as an artist using reused items. We also have a community workshop, which is what I manage our community workshop, and we also have artist studios on site, including a vintage clothing store. We have diverted thousands of pounds of arts and craft supplies from going into the landfill, and really encourage artists in our community to use reused and recycled materials and everything like that. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Matthew. Joining us from beautiful Steamboat, Colorado, we have Emmanuel. Oh, you are on mute. There you go.
There we go. Thank you very much, Meredith. It's an honor to be here and be part of this exciting, inspiring conversation. Thanks for joining us today. As Meredith said, I live in Silver Springs. I'm originally from France, and I have a background in actually engineering and watershed science. And I have worked with communities here in Colorado and overseas, mainly in Latin America and Africa. And I have helped communities find sustainable solutions to climate change mitigation and resilience, and also work on environmental justice issues. I also have a humble artistic practice and have worked as a humble curator. And I'm really interested in seeking creative ways to engage communities and artists to together address environmental and social issues. I have developed, co-developed guidelines to help facilitate community projects combining the arts and science. And with the support of the Office of Community Engagement and Outreach at CU, and the Boulder Community Art Alliance, I've had the opportunity to co-lead 2 cohorts with doctoral students, local artists, and community members in the Boulder area and throughout Colorado. And I have those guidelines in the resources that Meredith kindly compiled.
Thank you, Emmanuelle. And last, our moderator for today's conversation, Matt Chizamsky with the City of Boulder Office of Arts and Culture. If you want to introduce yourself, and then I know you have some framing concepts, and then we'll launch into our questions.
Great. Thanks very much, Meredith, and all the hosts and everyone for joining us. Yeah, my name is Matt. My pronouns are he, him. I'm from the Boulder Office of Arts and Culture. We're the local arts agency for Boulder. I'm also on the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts Advocacy Group. And I'm really excited to have this conversation, especially right now, because as we sort of began to think about the topic of greening your creative practice, it was just about the same time as the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, released their 6th assessment report. That was earlier this month. And the findings are not surprising, but they're really powerful. They're evidence of 3 truths, right? That first of all, what we know, our window to dial back climate change is closing, that we have basically 20 years to take the action we need to mitigate, but that we need to sort of refocus our attention. In addition to the mitigation, we need to start to talk about adapting to new conditions, because things have gotten to a point where adaptation is the path forward. And that finally, in the words of IPCC Chair, Dr. Ho-Sun Lee, that we have the tools right now, the know-how that's required to do those things, to limit warming, to mitigate the loss of biodiversity, and secure a livable future. We have what we need. And so this moment that we're in right now is one of hope, and it's one of conviction to take this action. It's now a part of everyone's job and a part of everyone's daily routine to take action on climate change. And to do so, we must admit that there has been a failure. Climate action of the past 40 years just isn't working. We used to focus our efforts in 3 key areas: voluntary action of individuals, market forces that create new technologies, and small, iterative, unrelated steps to accomplish climate change action. And so that didn't work. And we need to transform each of those 3 things. Instead of individual action, it needs to become regional and global. Instead of transforming market forces through technology, we need to transform entire systems, communities, and economic systems. And we need to set aside this idea of a small perspective about what you do in your life in favor of urgent, pervasive approach across all aspects of life. Now, those are big things, and it takes deep cultural shifts and creative thinkers to help us with those changes. This all must be a commitment across generations. It's a cross-generational project. It must include new language, new images, new myths, new heroes to help us imagine an alternative future. And it must evolve past this message of guilt and foreboding into a story of hope and triumph. So all of those creative things are the work of artists. The arts is foundational to climate action. And so I'm really honored to be with these 4 experts who can kind of walk us through the beginnings of what that might mean for a creative practice, and what we can do individually to affect the project of our generation. So I'm going to launch into questions in just a second, but if you have questions, I'll just repeat what Meredith said, pop them into the chat. We'll try to get to them in the last half. I hope to get everyone's questions asked. But let this be a beginning of a conversation so that we can continue to do this work, which is now so important to every single thing that we do. So with that, I want to put this first question to all of you, but I think I'll start with you, Emmanuelle, since we've worked together briefly in the past. I feel comfortable putting you on the spot. But the first question is about assessing impacts. In thinking about individual artists, the small businesses that they run, the way that they work with nonprofits and venues, how does an artist assess their climate impacts of their arts practice?
Thank you for the question, Matt. I think there's many ways to assess. I think we can speak to both individual practice and also community practice, which I feel are both important. So in terms of assessing your individual practice, there's many ways to go about it. I think Matthew can speak to that, depending on the material you use, the energy you use, creating your art, transporting your art. So we can look at this more kind of simple ways of measuring your art with material and the way you actually displaying and distributing your art. But I also think more in terms of collaborative process and project. And this is kind of more the practice that I have been encouraging. So as you work with communities and work with a different, maybe broader audience, this is how you can kind of maybe measure the impact of a community project as you bring new groups, emerging artists, decision makers to the table to work with collaboratively. This is what we intend to do through the guidelines and really prepare artists to facilitate this kind of project and bring the artists, the scientists, the decision makers at the same level. I think in the past we have used artists to interpret science. What I think is important is to bring artists, community members, decision makers at the table and work equally. So I think to me, this already has kind of a greater impact in the decision-making process, in the awareness, in bringing people more people to the table. So I think this is a way to start measuring and talking about the impact. In the guideline, we have actually different processes that we encourage to think of at the beginning of the project process. We have 4 different phases in which we engage facilitators to take in the exploring, orienting, creating, and reflecting phase. And as we go through prototyping and creating the project, we encourage facilitators to think of ways that they can actually measure the impact of the project, whether it's through decision-making, at the community level, with municipalities, working on more just on-the-ground project, or is just measuring the participation and the audience that the project is actually attracting. So I don't know if this is kind of still maze, but there's a lot of different tools that I can actually put in the chat as well on how to maybe more precisely measure different impact of community projects. I will do that, and I will put that in the chat in a minute. Did that answer a bit your question?
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's great. And I'm glad there are resources out there. Maybe hand it off to Molly. I think that you have some resources as well, but I wonder about your thoughts about assessing climate impacts.
A great question, and thank you, Emmanuelle. That's really important insight because measuring's hard. It just is, especially for our sector, which is really nuanced and can get really specific, as I'm sure Matthew can share in terms of like the individual small items artists use, and then on a larger scale, moving shows around the country, all these different ways in. I think measurement's just that. It's a really hard question because I think there's different schools of thought, and folks who are doing this have different points of view into it, which is some say we have, what gets measured gets done, right? That old adage. We have to find a baseline to know if we start to do better. And then there's some folks who say, great, we have no capacity to begin with. Let's not waste our time measuring. Let's not spend that energy, that staff time, whatever it is. Let's just start doing. And I'm not saying which one's right or wrong. There's just different ways in. So something at the BGA we look at is sort of big footprint measurements. So let's not get down to measuring, the material use of that weird hinge you needed for the door in that one show, right? Forget it. We're going to lose our minds. Let's look at sort of the big picture things like HVAC, heating, cooling, energy usage at theater. Just by measuring that, which you can do pretty easily, you can get to a huge part of your carbon footprint. So if you want to measure, that's one place to start. There are, as Emmanuel said, and I know you're going to put tools in, there's tons of tools out there if you are interested in measuring, and different philosophies in terms of, are we just measuring carbon? Are we measuring things that have a more sort of intersectional measurement that's a little harder to do? And I think the conversation that I'm starting to feel from oh my God, amazing, from our sector is that we have to have some basic benchmarking, but let's make that unique to each region. Let's sort of make it an opt-in place to start, and go from there. Let's just, it's interesting. Our UK colleagues are really into measurement because their funding system requires it, right? So government funds the arts there. Magic. And so therefore they have a carrot to dangle. So if you measure and you start to do better, you get funding in different ways. We don't have that same setup here in the US, as I'm sure all of us are all too aware. So we have to think differently about measurement.
Thank you. Meagan, I wonder if you have anything to add, especially from your perspective where you're dealing with the things.
Yeah, I was thinking as Molly was talking, because I'm sort of at the base level of the organization, I'm one of many employees, and I don't really have any decision-making power because I'm not even a supervisor of anybody else. And so my measurement, it always feels like I'm limited in my ability to influence those people higher up that can make decisions that involve things like energy use. So what I always find myself doing is looking at the trash. I'm looking at the piles of trash. I'm looking at the roll-up dumpster that shows up at the end of the show. And then we take the whole set down and we throw it in the dumpster. And seeing that is what makes me be like, okay, but look at all this perfectly good wood or furniture or fabric or whatever it is that's being thrown in that dumpster. And how do we do anything with it? Anything other than put it in this dumpster? Or, my colleagues will all tell you that they see me going through the trash all the time. And those are such small things because that's the individual level. And yet it's something tangible that I can actually do, and that I can help teach other people how to do it properly and how to make sure things go in the right bin. And so I'm measuring those piles of trash at my home and at my work is really the angle that I use most of the time.
That's great. Matthew, I think you were called out a couple of times. I wonder, through your customers, through your partnerships, how you've been able to sort of get insight onto how artists can assess their climate impacts.
Well, speaking kind of to what Meagan was just saying, the measurement so we measure every donation that comes in. We weigh it. So we have a rough idea of how much we've at least temporarily stopped from going into the landfill. And it's incredible how much people have in their basements and attics and all of that stuff. And Meagan, if I was in your position, I would be going through the garbage too, and I would be trying to save absolutely everything. Because, we have volunteer days where people will come and help us sort through these donations. And our rule is, if we can, provide it to another artist, we'll put it in the store. If it's something that we don't really sell, but can still have some life in it, we'll take it to Goodwill. And inevitably there's some stuff that just kind of falls onto the bottom that does then end up, sadly, in the trash. As far as our artists, everyone is so happy to know that we exist, not only because of the drastic price discount from shopping at a regular art supply store, but also just for the fact that they can use something that has been repurposed or recycled and is reused. And often the biggest feedback we get is people will come in and they'll find something that they didn't even know existed or didn't even know they were looking for, or that kind of thing. So yeah.
You know, the one thing I'm kind of hearing from everyone, which I think is really important, is to like target on something, right? It's like there may be a way your own practice, your own business is most obviously, you know, the path to taking climate action. And you each said that in kind of slightly different ways, but, you know, I wanted to kind of zero in on that because, you know, artists are often small business owners. They're running, and, you know, the individual artists running a business. There's sometimes contractors, they're sometimes working with nonprofits and venues, you know, that there's varying degree of sort of responsibility for the work you do versus lack of agency when you're involved with a big organization. And so I just wonder, you know, in the context of like moving beyond measurement into the next hard question, which is how do you wrestle with everything that needs to be done, that, you know, is there a way artists can have power and agency in like tactics for climate adaptation with their own business, the organizations that hire them, with their networks? What are your thoughts on that sort of thing? We'll start with you, Molly.
Sure. Yes, for sure. I want to embarrass Meagan now and call her out as an example of just what you're saying. And Meagan, I'm going to challenge you to remove the word just from your vocabulary right now, which I need to do as well. But you are not just dumpster diving. You are not, you know, I know you feel like you don't have decision-making agency, but you do. In fact, you started an entire organization around this. So I think Meagan is a perfect example of someone who might feel like they are, you know, a worker bee. We've all, you know, theater is hierarchical, arts are hierarchical. We can feel that way sometimes. But in fact, we all have so much agency, even if it's just over our sphere. You know, I know you work hard at those batteries and the recycling and all that, or, you know, managing up, as you will. You know, a story one of our steering committee members tells is that he was at lunch with a very famous Broadway producer. It was a very fancy lunch. And the producer looked at him and said, look, I understand what someone like Meagan can do. Meagan's down there doing the work. She gets to start to, you know, think about sourcing. I get it. I get what like a stage manager could do. They're in management. That makes sense. You know, they use paper. They could switch from paper. But I'm a producer. I'm just a producer. What could I possibly do? Right. And I think all of us want to, you know, scream at this producer going, oh my God, you're the producer. We feel like you have all the power. But I think it's a great example of it's so easy to give up your power, right? Even this person who we all look to, like, you have all this decision-making power, quickly goes, no, I don't. I need it's the people, you know, the TD is the one with the power. You know, and of course the producer has tons of power. She's the one who could say, this is a priority to me, and empower those of us on the call to do that work. So I think that's important. And I think, you know, if you're looking for an example of, you know, an artist taking agency in their own sphere, I'll let Meagan tell her story. Told you I was going to embarrass you.
That's fair. One of the first thing that I thought of when you asked this question was that what I always tell anyone and everyone who will listen to me is don't do the things that are really hard to do. Find the things that are easy to do. Find the things that are not overwhelming, that aren't going to make you shut down, that aren't going to make you like give up your favorite ice cream. Don't give up your favorite ice cream. Give up something you were kind of like, you know, I don't really feel that strongly about this anyway. So switch your eggs to, you know, a paper carton instead of a styrofoam carton. Always think about those little things that are easy to do to start, because as those things always snowball. And this is where I always come back to, because after years of being the person who is in the theater at the bottom, nagging anyone and everyone who would listen, yelling at people about rechargeable batteries and being like, this would save you money in the long run. I do not understand why you cannot bite the bullet and spend the money now when you know it's going to save you money. I can put the numbers in front of you, but like, it's logic. Like, everybody knows rechargeable batteries are going to save you money in the long run. And after feeling like I was just being this annoying person, and it felt like there no impact after years. And then suddenly a couple of years later, I'm here having like seeing the ripples. You know, when you first start, the ripples are so small and you can't really tell that they're happening. You're just like, what's the point of what I'm doing? I'm going to the grocery store and I'm still the only person with reusable grocery bags. And that can really weigh you down. But you just have to keep going and keep doing the next little thing, because the next little thing turns into the next little thing and it turns into the next little thing. And where I sit now, 5 years into my zero waste journey and 2 years into my grad school program, is that I had 22 people show up to my community discussion on Monday. And I produced an event in December for Climate Change Theater Action, which is a global theater festival that playwrights from all over the world write short plays on a theme that coincide with the COP conference. So the theme was envisioning a global Green New Deal. And me, as just an audio engineer, never having done anything other than show up and set up a sound system, I was like, I have to produce an event. I don't know how to produce an event, but hey, I know how to put on a show. And all I did was talk to my friends. Like, I literally feel like it happened by magic, because I feel like I didn't actually like do enough work for it to have happened as successfully as it happened. Because I just was like, hey, I know a bunch of actors, I know a bunch of technicians, and I have a lot of friends and family, and I just wouldn't shut up about it. All I did was not shut up. So I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Are you interested? And they're like, yeah, kind of. So then I sent them a Google form that was like, these are the plays we're doing. Choose the one you want to do, the ones you're interested in doing. And that was how I cast it. And nobody bailed. That's probably the most surprising thing, is that out of all these people who agreed to do this volunteer opportunity, which I got the venue venue that I had worked at previously, so I knew all the people there, and I was like, hey, I have this idea and I have no money for it. It's this whole volunteer thing. And they were like, oh yeah, totally. So like the whole event cost me $15 and 75 people showed up in person. We recorded it and it's had 50 something watch hours since then. And then even that event, which was just supposed to be the start of it, it was like, I thought I was going to have to do more work to actually get this movement going. I was like, okay, so we're going to start this movement in Colorado. I hadn't heard of the Broadway Green Alliance until I was in graduate school. And so people in Colorado, much like me, people in Colorado were not aware that there was this like green theater thing happening. And so producing this event and partnering with some of the core organizations in Colorado, like the Denver Actors Fund, which provides medical aid to theater artists in Colorado. Just doing that, like then suddenly the journalist in Denver, John Moore, wrote an article that featured me. And now all of a sudden, like Molly is sending me forwarding me emails from people who are like, hey, I heard there's this thing happening. And it's like all of this stuff is happening. And I'm just an audio engineer who was just working in the Denver theater community a couple years ago. So that's what I always say, is just like, keep going, every little thing, all the things that are easy, because then when stuff like this starts to happen, then you recognize that the little things aren't little, that they do keep going. You start to see the ripples. And when you see the ripples, then you're even more motivated to do more things. Your values shift even more in the direction that you want them to go. And suddenly the things that used to be hard seem a lot easier, a lot more accessible, and you keep doing them. And then you're influencing like everyone that I talk to, just as at the very least is thinking about plastic just a little bit more when they're done talking to me than they were before.
Fantastic. Thank you for telling us about that. And, something I thought was really interesting in what you said is that you didn't do it alone, right? That you had friends and networks and partnerships. And so, Emmanuel, I think you may be the expert on the panel about partnerships and how to put things together with others. I wonder if you have a reaction to that.
Yeah, thank you, Meagan and Molly, for sharing. I thought maybe I could just share from what Meagan just said. I think what is really important is in terms of agency, who do you choose to collaborate with? It seems like with that, Meagan spoke to that, and Molly had kind of a little story, a little anecdote, and I thought maybe I'll just choose one, for example, kind of to link all the thoughts. Oftentimes there's a call for artists to participate in different projects, and one that I am thinking of is from the CORE, which is a community office of renewable energy in Aspen, for example. And a few years ago, they had a call for artists to participate in a fundraising event. And what I liked about this hall was not just, hey, artists, can you do this for free? And we give you work at an auction and raise some funds. The call for it was to create art using, going back to the material and how can we be greener, using ink that had been created. And actually, I have a marker, it's called air ink. This ink is created through capturing pollution from cars in India, that MIT students developed. And Corin actually invited to speak and to his technology innovation. And they, using this ink, they ask artists to produce and create art. So anyway, I went to the opening and every piece was absolutely gorgeous, sold for a lot of money. The artists were also paid for the art that they created. So I think this is a really perfect example for the artists to choose a collaboration that is extremely meaningful, that support a local initiative and like you said, just maybe create through this participation in this kind of collaborative project, more positive change. So I think this is a really great way to collaborate and in a project that has a direct impact in the community. And since today it seems like I'm the one who just kind of put different resources, that made me think also of a very well compiled kind of values, and most of you are probably familiar with the American for the Art aesthetics attributes. And I will put that. So I think this is always something to go back to in terms of just kind of choosing who you collaborate, how you collaborate with, in terms of your commitment, the cultural integrity of your collaboration, the disruptive element, the risk taking. So I will put this again in the chat, but I think collaboration is key to really bring other actors and really have a really great impact.
Thank you. Matthew, I wanted to kick it to you and see if you have any thoughts about this sort of line of reasoning that artists can have.
I like the Emmanuel, what you just said about the choosing your collaboration. It seems like a lot of environmentally forward projects in the past, it's mostly about the narrative and less about like sometimes it's how the materials were sourced, but it seems like it's more and more and more. That's a big focus for those types of projects. And there's so many different areas that I didn't even think about. Like, I didn't know about the Broadway Green Alliance. It never even really crossed my mind that was an issue, obviously, because I'm not in that realm that much. And that's everywhere, every single thing, especially in the arts, as per our conversation, could be dialed to a more thoughtful use of resources. And even in our briefly on our planning meeting, we talked about just encouraging people to take public transportation or ride a bike or whatever it is to come to the show that you're putting on would have such a huge impact. But talking about the materials you use for your art piece, obviously reusing stuff like we have at ReCreative and places like that. Hopefully it will become more and more of a thing that you don't have to seek out or be such a specialty item like the air ink pen you have, Emmanuel. It would just be, this is just where we get ink instead of having to be so specific about it. But it seems like culture makers and drivers like artists and creatives are the ones that are going to make that a mainstream thing rather than just having like this weird, a weird specialty item that's like, oh, this is so green, as a matter of fact, rather than just like, this is just how we do things now.
Thanks. Yeah, and actually brought up something that is sort of a deep question that I have that we all discussed in our preparations, but I've been following an organization out of the UK, Julie's Bicycle, that did a pretty exhaustive study of the music industry there. And it was some convincing evidence that the biggest part of the carbon footprint of musicians is their audience traveling alone, single occupant vehicles to a venue, to a festival and back again. And that the biggest thing that the music industry could do would be to address that carbon impact. And I feel like that's probably true for most arts practices, that there's a lot that you can do and there's a lot of detail, but there's these hidden things that are big, like your audience. And so I wonder, Meagan, maybe we could start with you, just like how you react to that, and if you see both the truth in that and what your thoughts are, but also are there other hidden things that could be brought forward into consideration?
Yeah, I think that that's pretty powerful, knowing that as much as I can do on the inside, there's also this whole thing on the outside of people coming to my shows. So even if I do all this work to make the inside of the industry more sustainable and we throw less stuff away and we use less energy, there's still all these people driving and into our events. And I think about that at the Denver Center in particular, because I ride the train into work, and but when I was moving for this job, I was like, well, I can move here or here, because these are the only two lines that are actually in any form convenient to actually get to the theater district. And the huge limitations on that. So like I'm one of very few people who ride the train in, especially if we're on a show schedule, and then the way that the train changes, like it slows down after 9 p.m. So then the train's only every half hour. So then let's say I get done, right when the one train's showing up, and then I have to wait 40 minutes for the train to go home at the end of the night, at the end of a show. And, I'm a female at downtown Denver kind of thing. And all of these, I think about all these things and how on earth can we make that kind of thing more accessible to patrons when there's this whole parking garage that costs $10 to park in. And I don't have any insights on that at this point. I think I've been so focused on the inside of the industry and the things that I can do, because those big things over there are the things that make me overwhelmed and shut down. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to just focus on all my little bits of trash more so. So I don't have any hidden insights in that, but it's pretty powerful. And it makes me think about how much we need the system-wide change to really get anywhere. And I've chosen my lane, and my lane is over here, and I am figuring out how I can influence the lanes that are doing more of the bigger scale stuff, citywide stuff, systemic stuff. I haven't figured out how to actually connect those things yet.
Understood. Yeah, but it sounds like you have the beginning of an idea. Just fixing the entire public transportation system is art screening tactic.
Yeah, that's true.
That.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, that's all right. But Matthew, how about from your perspective, especially like the visual artists that you're working with, if you're talking to someone who has an open studio, is working with a gallery, and they have to get an audience, like, what are your thoughts on how they can affect that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Megan's point, the public transit in Denver is not great. It's very, it's made for suburban commuters, at least the light rail is kind of. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I organize some music stuff, and I'm going over it in my head now. I'm like, oh, we need to add this to our message of like, when we sell a ticket, say, hey, we really, really encourage you to ride a bike or walk or take a scooter or whatever, just do anything but drive your car. And I don't know. I think that's probably like one of the biggest things I'm going to take away from this conversation is encouraging people to do that. And not only as a patron of the arts, but also as creators, to encourage your patrons to do the same thing. Hopefully, I mean, I don't know. I say hopefully our public transit gets better, but that's such a huge thing to hope for, so.
Yeah. Emmanuel, how about you?
I don't have, I'm an advocate of alternative transportation, just as Matthew is, I think there's two ways to look at it. If it's a local event, for example, through the guidelines, we encourage kind of place-based project where people don't have to travel so far and can still work on local issues. And through my consulting work, engineering work, I work in sustainable infrastructure, and I have been really an advocate for example, making sure that there are a safe place to lock your bicycle and bicycle racks, which is very simple, but oftentimes there isn't, at venues. And that's something that maybe as even an artist or coordinator or facilitator, you can make sure that happens. There are facilities and racks. When it comes to traveling, air travel, as we're saying for concerts, I've also worked in climate change and tourism. I teach a course on that. So when that is an issue, the other ways to look at maybe compensating for this traveling pollution is really making sure that when people come to a special place to participate or view the performance, that they actually also improve or just participate in the local economy. Oftentimes, so there's choices that the people and the audience can make, where they stay, where they buy the food, the souvenir they purchase, really to make sure of that. And also to be aware of the resources that they may be competing with the local communities when it comes to water and other things. Those are other issues. So I think there's our choices and education that can be also be done for the audience to know when they actually choose to travel, say long distance to a specific community, how can they give back and contribute to the local economy, and be also share resources. So those are just thoughts.
That's good. And, Molly, I'll hand the question to you too, but maybe sort of a follow-up that might go someplace else is, are there lessons from the pandemic? Because I know that, a lot of professional theater did do some amazing work online. So are there lessons that could help us unravel this problem?
Sure. I think the main lesson from the pandemic for arts is that changing it isn't going to break it, right? We are a medium steeped in tradition. And for a lot of ways, that's really important. And we do build on the experience of others, but in other ways, sometimes we can get stuck, right? Well, we can't switch to digital scripts because we always have used paper scripts. And if I switch to a digital script, the show will break. Well, we did virtual events with digital scripts, and guess what? The show didn't break. And so I think this is an exciting moment to sort of, seize the changes we were forced to make by necessity, and now say, okay, I know it feels like we have to opt into this environmental thing, but it's not also a necessity, and use this moment to pivot and capitalize on the fact that we were forced to change things that felt absolutely fundamental to what we do, right? Gathering in a space, fundamental. Well, guess what? Here we are on Zoom. Now look, I do want to highlight, because I think that the transportation thing is tricky because it feels kind of out of our control, right? Like, we can't change all of public transit ourselves right now. Okay, so that can feel really overwhelming. And same thing with a footprint. Even if we move to Zoom, as we know, video is a carbon emitter. Right now we have a carbon footprint by being on Zoom. So there is no running away from having a carbon footprint. Even when you're dead, you have a carbon footprint. Like, we're not getting out of this. So I like the BJ's first principle is it's impossible to be green, right? Again, we have a carbon footprint, give it up. We can only be greener. So looking to be greener tomorrow than I am today. And then, okay, what about next week? And then how can I build on it for next year? And I think that can be helpful when faced with these really big, impossible feeling things. They're not impossible, we know this, but it can feel overwhelming. I feel overwhelmed. But I think that the other thing I want to really highlight something Sheila said in the chat here, which is, as artists, how can we reimagine? And I think that's key, because as artists, we have really special tools in our tool belt. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to go do that great work. Emmanuelle is doing incredible policy work. I shouldn't be doing that. I was trained as a stage manager. But what we can do is use our skills to shine a spotlight on that and amplify exactly those, tools that Emmanuelle was just saying, to collaborate together, to use our ability to storytell and communicate well and build empathy and community and all the tools that are really necessary to, say, move that public transportation fight forward, right? So I think that's exciting.
That's great. Is there anyone else who wants to weigh in on lessons from the pandemic generally?
I feel like that's really what I'm trying to capitalize on here. I feel this as my idea to start the Colorado chapter of the Broadway Green Alliance happened last spring. And I was like, all right, Molly, paperwork right now. And I was like, okay, whoa, you got a lot of work to do before you can actually start an organization. And so it's like, I just lost my train of thought completely where I was going with that.
No worries. Keep going, get that thought back, but I wanted to sort of zero in. There's been a couple of points in the chat I wanted to point out that people have in the chat, like, expanded out. Like, transportation is not only about that, it's about housing, like the inner circle of the city. It's expensive, right? And the confusion around the lifting of the mask mandates and the changes that occurred in occupancy and everything, like, those have carbon impacts too on how we get people around. So that's interesting. But maybe we could zero in, because there are also some questions in the chat about sort of practical resources. Kate asked about local fine art printing companies that use sustainable practices and soy inks. There's another question, I think, from Leah about the impacts of tech resources. So I wonder, we could back away from the big intractable issues and talk about some more practical tactics. Does anyone have any responses to some of those questions? Matthew, I'm looking at you.
I saw that question from Leah. I think that's really interesting. So she had said that a lot of our musicians are using iPads instead of printing out their own sheet music and buying sheet music. And then the concern of tech waste. So I don't know. I'd be curious to see those side by side, because I feel like that's an increasing issue in our modern world with all of our gadgets and everything, the tech waste and batteries and where all that is sourced from and the production and everything like that. I don't have any real actual insight on that as far as like the numbers go or anything. But I think that's a very interesting question. The idea of, I don't know if you would call that greenwashing, but like the idea of something being sold to us as a green alternative and then ultimately it not really being much better in the long run. But I'm not sure.
Which also starts to make me think about the new world of NFTs and the enormous carbon impact of that seemingly benign format. So I don't know, anyone else about ideas on some green practices in that narrow sense of technology and printing?
Sure, I can jump in real fast. First of all, again, I think this question gets to the gist, which I keep coming back to, is you can't be green. There's no perfect. So we just have to keep striving at what's better. And, I don't have the data on, exactly the carbon footprint of an iPad based, it would all determine on how long are you using it? What How are you charging? What energy source are you using to charge the iPad, right? It gets really complex. And so it's easy to get bogged down in that. And again, I'll just keep making the argument of, okay, it might not be perfect, but is it better? Is it a start? Is it a start we should do and then keep evaluating? What about a year from now? Where is our energy coming from now? Now, is it better? In terms of practical resources on the BGA website, I'll put in the chat, we do have a national database that looks to try to identify these really hyper-specific needs of our community. And I'm going to plug here, it is a crowdsourced document. So I'm sure there are folks here going to be able to add to the Denver and the Colorado area. Recycling e-waste is going to make that iPad last longer, sure. And the other argument I think that certainly I hear a lot, which is, all right, I want to switch to iPads. It's time, we're going to invest so that they're, just used by the company and they get used a lot, but that costs a lot of money. And, printing scripts are free. And of course, we know it's not free. And if you look at some of the digital tools that exist for this, there's a few on the market, all of which are great. We've got Scriptation. We've got, oh my God, my brain. I will put them in the link, but all of them have actually on their website some really cool data about what is the average number of trees for like a script, certainly a new script where you're constantly doing script changes. I've been in that room printing and it's, oh, there's so much. Thank you, Fourscore for music. There's a whole bunch of them. And they also have calculated how much money you can save. So for some of us trying to make that argument in organizations when we get financial pushback, there are great tools there. And I will stop talking and put some things in the link in the chat.
That's great. Megan, you have something to add to that?
I like what Molly said about getting bogged down, because it's so easy to be like, okay, I want to do the thing that is absolutely green, and like holding off on taking a step because you're like, I don't know, is that green enough? And so but the result of that is often that you don't take any action at all, because it's like, oh, we don't want to spend this money now if we're going to have to spend the money later. We're both too short-sighted or too long-sighted in terms of how do we actually make the next right choice. So not getting bogged down by that and be like, okay, we're moving towards a greener option, and then once we've gotten used to that and we've adapted to that, and now let's reevaluate again and then look for the next green option again. And the importance of continuing to adapt and continuing to change and continuing to evaluate and always be looking for the next thing that we can do so that there's always motion happening is really important.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I was hoping to build off of Sheila's question and Molly, your reaction to that. I think there's a lot of depth there, because greening and arts practice is not only about the material you use, your audience, and the carbon, and it's also needs to be like an examination of what effect your narrative has, the story you're telling through your art about the world. Do you all have advice on how creators and performers can have an impact through paying attention to their narrative? Emmanuel, why don't we start with you?
Yes, just to kind of build upon what Molly and Meagan said, I think it's important to, and what you said, if you feel bogged down, to maintain hope. And I think the message and the intention you have behind your artistic project is very important. And it's very complex. When you start looking at NFT and really measuring the impact of your practice. But I think what is really important to always go back to is the intention and the message, as you say, in your narrative. And making sure that your narrative is as inclusive as possible as well. I think those are very important. And then I just had a little, I don't know, I just made me think when Meagan said you can't just stop doing what you doing and knowing that it's never perfect. But I think for me, what I've done in my personal practice, when I just think, am I having an impact, questioning my practices, I always go back to nature. And I know that's what we talk about, recycling product, and just there's a lot you can use from nature. And again, it's science, but I go back to biomimicry. Just look at nature and using really simple elements of nature that have a very profound message. And it made me think I have a light, probably can flip my video on top of me. I've been making lights, big chandeliers out of trumpet plants that I found in the desert. And they're hollow in the stem. And actually the reason why they're hollow and they have that kind of beautiful shape is because they sequester carbon inside the stem. So to me, they make me feel good, which just feels good to do once in a while. And using these plants have this message, of course, it comes from nature, but this plant itself has this functionality that is important. So I think sometimes having kind of making sure that you're using material things that have like a meaning and an intention and a message in what you do. It could be as simple as using this plant and having a more kind of collaborative message through your collaborative project with decision makers, people working at the city as you do, and artists, and maybe working with Native American communities, Hispanic communities. It's really that message.
That's great. Yeah. So Meagan, why don't we go to you next? Like, what do you think about the message, the narrative? What do artists need to do about their practice to green their practice in that regard?
The narrative is so powerful. I like storytelling. Obviously, I am a storyteller, so maybe I'm a little biased towards storytelling, but the narratives that we tell with our art is how we actually get to people's feelings. Like, of course, in an organizational level, and when you're talking about decision making for an organization or a business or whatever, there's going to be a lot of logic involved, a lot of money involved. But narratives are how we get to people's values, how we get to people's feelings. And human behavior doesn't change if you don't address feelings. So however you can make people feel, whether that's, and like, a lot of what I've learned is that the doom messaging is not the most productive messaging because it just makes people shut down. But like, I individually run off of a healthy dose of doom and a healthy dose of hope. I can't get too bogged down by the doom because then it's like, oh, why am I doing anything? And I can't get the hope does make people complacent. So I need a bit of that like, oh, sense of urgency. Things are really not good right now. We need to keep moving, but also we can keep moving. We should keep moving, and we can get where we need to go. And I think narratives are the way that we communicate those things. That's how we actually appeal to people and get them to change their individual behavior, how to get past the convenience barriers that are, I feel, a huge part of at least the plastic side of the problem, and make people feel things. Making people feel things is the best. It's what I love about art. It's why we do it, is because we make people feel things.
Molly, you agree with that?
Yes, for sure. That was beautifully said. The point of what we do as storytellers, our sort of special sauce in this work. I actually, if it's okay, I want to read just one paragraph because Marianne Hegler, who is an incredible climate reporter and activist, just wrote The Case for Intersectional Climate Coverage. And that speaks so much to it, Meagan and Emmanuel, what you were just saying. And one part really spoke to me. I wouldn't argue that people don't tune out of climate coverage because it's too big of a problem. They tune out because it's presented as yet another problem. That's not what climate change is. It's a deeply intersectional problem that's intertwined with every other big issue we face, both at its roots, in its impacts today, and in its future. That's how we should be talking about it. And to do that, we have to do the work to understand the problem. So I put the full article in the chat. I highly recommend it, but I think it gets to we can't pull it out and put it over here. This is the crux of the problem we are facing right now. And as Meagan said, we have to talk to humans in order to work towards solutions.
Emmanuel, did you have a response to that?
May I add something really beautiful? Thank you for sharing. And what I liked is the strong and complex message, yet the simple words. So what we're talking about, in my field, is systemic change and a lot of jargon that I think people can be turned off by because they feel they don't really understand the complexity of the approach. And I think in the narrative, it is important to not include much jargon. and really make sure that it is compelling and touch a lot of people. And I think that's very important. And another thing, that the narrative, oftentimes I have seen in my work, surveying, interviewing people. So you do that, and then you write the narrative, and automatically the narrative is your kind of own interpretation of what people have said. So I think being conscious of that as you write a narrative, through interviews, through conversations, make sure that the word of the people that you want to include remain their words.
That's a great point. And you made me think of something else, which is that the scientists have had their chance to convince everyone based on the data. And so, those issues of the emotional and social issues that we're dealing with, like, that's the realm of the people in this room right now. It's our chance to give that a shot. So, it is a call to action.
Very much so. And as Meagan said, to actually create, behavioral change.
Precisely. Yeah, very good. Well, I kind of wanted to wind down with a last question for each of you. And Matthew, we'll start with you. And we want to know your advice to the people on the call. One simple, specific thing, one tactic that they could take on right now that's a step towards greening their creative practice. What would you give advice as the one thing that they should go out and do right now?
Well, I guess shameless plug for ReCreative Denver, but you could come shop at our store and use reused and upcycled materials. Also, on the flip side of that, as an artist, like if you have stuff that you're not using anymore and you're cleaning out your studio, don't throw it away. Find another artist that wants to use it, bring it here, take it to Goodwill, anything like that. I mean, again, that's speaking to Molly's point of it's not a huge thing, but it's something.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I'll make the plug too. If you're in the north side of town in Boulder, Art Parts is
Art Parts. Yep. Yeah, they're wonderful as well. And I think there's another one that opened in Colorado Springs. If anyone's down there, I don't know what it's called, but they're kind of popping up. There's also a ReCreative in Seattle. So,
right.
Yep.
Yeah, good. No, this is our future. I appreciate it.
And we have, sorry, one more quick thing. We have one of the artists in our space is moving to Milwaukee at the end of the month, and she wants to start a ReCreative in Milwaukee.
All right.
So
let's make it nationwide.
It's spreading. Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Molly, you have any tactics and something we could do right now?
This I think this is one of the hardest questions. There's so many things we can be doing right now. I think for theater artists, for folks, who are planning works, the biggest thing you can do is think about sustainability from the beginning, right? I think any of us who've been at a strike know if you're starting to think about sustainability at strike, you are too late. There is no time, the dumpster is there. So thinking about it from the beginning of your practice and whatever that looks like for you in that moment, right? If you're producing a gallery and you go to Matthew's store to shop, you're thinking about it from the beginning. Or at the beginning, as you buy new materials, you're thinking about their end of life. And so maybe that is going to the shop, but you're planning from the beginning so that it is a value statement at that first production meeting. I'm going to keep speaking from the theater because that's what I know. Thank you for defining strike. I'm sorry to use jargon. So whatever it is, you're starting from the beginning. People are starting to come into jobs with green writers. I am stoked for that. But I would say that is the best place to start. And on a personal level, I would say start getting loud. Get loud in your community, get loud, writing to your representatives, get loud in your art space. Just, you got to get loud. And yes, green writers are coming.
Fantastic. Yes, I will second that. As a government official, we need more loud. And we need more loud from the art sector. There's plenty of people screaming at city councils, at state legislatures, at the federal government about all sorts of things. The art sector is really powerful. And so we all need to get together and get loud for sure. Megan, you have any tactics for people to try out right away?
Yeah, that was gonna be my one. I was gonna say talk about it. Just like talk about it. Just keep talking about it for years and years and years. Just never stop talking about it. Someone at my community discussion on Monday, they were like, just having somebody who nags you all the time about it is super powerful, because you're just like, you learn so much from it, and there's a little bit of that external incentive, but also because I think maybe because I nag with love instead of anger or anything else, then it's kind of goes in the right place. It's not bad nagging, it's positive nagging, and I never stop. So then it's like, okay, it's just easier to do the thing because the thing is not that hard anyway. So.
Very good. Thank you. Before I hand it back to Meredith to sort of round this out, I want Emmanuel to give us that one last tactic. What's one thing we can do right now?
Yeah, one last, and Meagan made me think of a wonderful expression that Marta Kern, you and I know well, kind of cited. She calls it a point of wonder. And I think it's a beautiful expression. So she said, find your point of wonder. What is it that you question that maybe you can change, an issue in your community? Find this point of wonder and start, like we can say, talk about it and see who shares the same point of wonder. Go talk to government officials, talk to your neighbors. So find out who shares that point of wonder. What if we did this together? What if we changed this? What is this issue? So anyway, I just wanted to share Marda's beautiful point of wonder.
That's great. I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. And thank you all so much. This has been a great conversation. I hope it's the beginning of a lot more. And so with my appreciation, I'll hand it back to Meredith to wrap us up.
Thank you. I'll give a little Zoom applause for everybody. Thank you, Matt, for moderating and asking such thoughtful questions. And of course, to Molly, Megan, Matthew, and Emmanuel for so many great ideas, quotes, resources, so many resources. Please know I've been compiling and Googling and sorting all of these. They will go out to everyone who registered for this event as a follow-up. Give us a few days to put that all together and get the recording put together. That will also get posted on our various websites and resource lists. We hope that you found this conversation empowering and insightful and helpful to all of you, and that also prompts you to share it with your friends. As Megan said, talk about it. Now you have a thing to share. Watch and learn. Our next Tools for the Creative Life workshop, as Leah said at the beginning, we do these monthly. Our next one, we're going back in sort of professional resources for artists. It's on May 24th. It will be in person, oh my gosh, at Converge Denver at 4 o'clock. And we'll be hearing from Julia Reimer with Art Boss, amazing artist as well as consultant for artists on their business. She'll be talking about branding and website development. Any other comments or closing things that I forgot from our Tools for the Creative Life team? Thank you, Linda, for putting in the Converge Denver address. It's on Brighton Boulevard across the street from the Source. I think that wraps us up. Thank you everyone for your great engagement and conversation today. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Good to hop off. Anyone? I'm going to take it as a yes.
All right. Thanks everyone. That was great.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Allison.
This has been awesome.
Everyone have a good day.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew, Megan, Molly.
Yes.
Hope we can meet some days.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.